Welcome back to my YouTube channel, everyone. Today is May the 20th of 2016. I'm Frank DiMora, the author of the book, The Last Chronicles of Planet Earth. And I'm going to connect some dots between some very important prophecies today. And I'm going to be centering on the revived Roman Empire. Now, the Lord Jesus Christ reveals to us in the book of Revelation that in the last days there was going to be this revived Roman Empire. And when the revived Roman Empire was reborn, out of this revived Roman Empire would come the Antichrist, and he would rule this world for a period of 7 years, and then Jesus Christ would ride back from heaven to take his rightful throne in Jerusalem. Now, for a long time, I've been warning, based on Scripture, what we should be watching for when it concerns the European Union. So what I'm going to do is bring you back to a video that I made back in January of 16th of 2015. I'm going to play this as a reminder of what I warned you back in 2015. Because without a shadow of a doubt, we are seeing the things that I've been warning about. We're seeing the signs of the possible breakup of the European Union. And after you see what I gave to you back in January the 16th of 2015, I'm going to bring you to the newest interview by RT that came out, showing you what's going on in the European Union, and it's right on the mark as what I've been warning. So, as I said back in 2015, if the western leg of the old Roman Empire is in fact the revived Roman Empire that both Daniel and Jesus Christ reveal, then we should see the breakup. So here it is, the message that I gave to you back in 2015, and then I'll come back and present the newest information about the possible breakup of the European Union.
In my post yesterday, I put up a video that I had a conversation with my assistant, Amy Naomi, about what was taking place with the economy and how it was going to affect the European Union and affect the world, and how a collapsed economy, a world collapse, would bring on the Antichrist. And what we do know from Daniel chapter 2, verse 43, when we're dealing with the European Union, the revived Roman Empire of which the Antichrist is going to be rising up from, we see in Daniel some hints of what's going to happen with this revived Roman Empire when it comes. Now, if the western leg of the old Roman Empire is in fact this European Union, because they are the same nations that used to be in the old Roman Empire, then according to Daniel, we should see that these nations will not cleave together. Take a look at verse 43. And whereas thou sawest the iron mixed with merry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay. So again, there's other scriptures that give us more insights about what's going to happen. We know that the legs that the Lord showed us, the Roman Empire, this fourth beast that we see in the book of Daniel, described in chapter 2 and again in chapter 7. And in the last days, the legs, which is the old Roman Empire, filtered down to the feet and the toes. And we know what that is because the Lord gives us information about that as well. Daniel chapter 2, verse 41 and 42 says, And whereas thou sawest the feet and toes, part of pottery's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it of strength of the iron, for as much as thou sawest the iron mixed with merry clay. And the toes of the feet were part iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. Now, in the book of Revelation, chapter 17, verse 12, Jesus says, And the 10 horns which thou saw are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. So the European Union, revived Roman Empire, comes on the scene. It's already there, the western end of that old Roman Empire. And the final part of this world empire, or this beast, will filter down into 10 toes. So we know what the toes are. They are kings. It's no question about it. Kings that rule countries. So what you have is you have, no doubt, if the western leg of the old Roman Empire is in fact the revived Roman Empire, as it is coming together, it's already 28 nations. Look for the nations to break apart because we are told in Daniel they're not going to cleave together. And 10 nations, 10 kings will solidify, they'll come together, and they're going to give all their power over to the Antichrist, this little horn that shoots up among the 10 kings. So your eyes should be focused on world economy. What's going to happen to bring out the Antichrist? Now, back in May of 2009, I was talking about Greece. Greece was having horrendous problems with their economy, bank runs. And in my warnings, you could check my post, I said that this is the beginning of it. You'll see that the birth pang is already here as far as the financial institutions having major problems, but then it's going to show up again. And I believe that it is shown up again now. But let me play this video for you from May 2009.
700 million euros was withdrawn in one day and transferred into German bank accounts. This has come as Greece has announced there will be new elections on likely June 17 because they can't form a coalition. The background here is that the parties likely to be voted in on June 17 want to abandon the austerity plans imposed by the rest of Europe. But they want to stay in the euro. The rest of Europe, meanwhile, says, you do that, we kick you out of the euro.
So back in 2009, Greece, bad problems as I stated, and now we're seeing that it is magnified again in 2015. There was an article that came out today, January the 16th of 2015. The Greek bank runs have begun. Just like I thought that would happen way back when, but they're here again. It says 2 Greek banks request emergency liquidity assistance. In other words, they want some free money to help them out of the situation. It says the first time the phrase emergency liquidity assistance, or ELA, was used in the context of Greece was in August 2011, when Greece was imploding, when its banking sector was on and past the verge of collapse, and just before the ECB, which is the European Central Bank, had to unleash a global coordinated bailout with other central banks, including a global central bank liquidity swap, and unleash the LTRO to preserve the Eurozone. Now, if you don't know what the LTRO is, keep in mind we're dealing with the European Union, their central bank. The long-term refinancing operation, LTRO, is a cheap loan scheme for European banks that was announced by the European Central Bank, ECB, towards the end of 2011 in a bid to help ease the Eurozone. So back then they were trying to hold things together. And remember, if the European Union is that revived Roman Empire, according to Daniel, they're not going to hold together. And the end result will be 10 nations holding together, whereas right now there's 28, but we may see the breakdown, and if that happens, you'll know for sure that who these 10 kings or toes or horns are that are referred to by our Lord in the scriptures. The article also says, as a reminder, this is what happened back then in a move described as the last stand for Greek banks. The embattled country's central bank activated emergency liquidity assistance, ELA, for the first time on Wednesday night. Panic now ensuing in Greece. Now, how is this going to affect everyone else? Well, look for a domino effect. And in my book, I talk about it. And in many of my posts, I talk about the domino effect. Just go and do a Google search on Frank DiMora. Put down world economy collapses, domino effect, and I'm sure you'll see a lot of my warnings that I've posted. So what we need to be focusing on is what's going to happen in Europe. Are they going to break up in 2015? Back in March of 2013, I was showing you how Great Britain was talking how bad the economy was. He could see the breakdown. Let me play that for you.
Co-president of the Europe of Freedom and Democracy, Nigel Farage. The floor is yours.
Well, here we are, on the edge of a financial and social disaster, and in the room today we have the four men who were supposed to be responsible. And yet we've listened to the dullest, most technocratic speeches I've ever heard. You are all in denial. By any objective measure, the euro is a failure. And who is actually responsible? Who's in charge out of you lot? Well, of course, the answer is none of you, because none of you have been elected, none of you actually have any democratic legitimacy for the roles that you currently hold within this crisis. And into this vacuum, albeit reluctantly, has stepped Angela Merkel. And we are now living in a German-dominated Europe. Something that the European project was actually supposed to stop. Something that those that went before us actually paid a heavy price in blood to prevent. I don't want to live in a German-dominated Europe, and nor do the citizens of Europe. But you guys have played a role. Because when Mr. Papandreou got up and used the word referendum, or Mr. Wren, you described it as a breach of confidence. And your friends here got together like a pack of hyenas, rounded on Papandreou, had him removed and replaced by a puppet government. What an absolutely disgusting spectacle that was. And not satisfied with that, you decided that Berlusconi had to go. So he was removed and replaced by Mr. Monti, a former European Commissioner, a fellow architect of this Euro disaster, and a man who wasn't even a member of the Parliament. It's getting like an Agatha Christie novel, where we're trying to sort of work out who's the next person that's going to be bumped off. The difference is we know who the villains are. You should all be held accountable for what you've done. You should all be fired. And I have to say, Mr. Van Rompuy, 18 months ago when we first met, I was wrong about you. I said you'd be the quiet assassin of nation-state democracy, but you're not anymore. You're rather noisy about it, aren't you? You, an unelected man, went to Italy and said, this is not the time for elections, but the time for actions. What in God's name gives you the right to say that to the Italian people?
Now, the Swiss dropped a bombshell on the financial markets. Take a look at this January 15th, 2015 article. Swiss move shows euro is like a bad marriage. How do you know when you're looking at a bad marriage? Well, if one or both of the spouses can't wait to get out as the smallest crack in the door opens, you have a pretty good clue. Something like that just happened in Europe as we learned the real reason why so many traders were still invested in the euro. They had nowhere else to go. As the Swiss National Bank unlocked the doors on its gap on trading euros for Swiss francs, the rush to exit the euro was faster than one of those French bullet trains. And no one should be surprised because the euro, like the entire idea of the EU itself, has been a badly conceived arranged marriage from the beginning. We know this because every time the truth-telling markets or those annoying European people known as voters get a real chance to weigh in, they both clearly say they want out. Here's the problem. They're still free to go. Ask the people of Ireland, who were famously forced to vote again after they rejected a key EU treaty in 2008. Yes, the Irish voters did approve it in their re-vote a year later, but mostly because, like staying in a bad marriage, they realized they had no other option. Ask the people of Britain, who are showing greater and greater support for the anti-EU UKIP party. UKIP's leaders have the gall to insist on real political freedom for the UK and all the European nations. They also insist on things like one person, one vote, and the right of each sovereign nation to regulate immigration. Now, both of those ideas are a threat to the abusive EU husbands in Belgium who know that if they let their attractive wives like Britain, Ireland, Denmark, etc., assert their independence, they'll leave the EU marriage quickly. Moving down into the article, it says, but all of this is why the Swiss National Bank's decision is at least a clear rhetorical victory for UKIP and everyone else who has insisted that only reason the EU is still together is because the anti-democratic powers who run it simply don't let anyone leave. So this step by the Swiss not to be pegging their currency to the euro, it's just another notch in the EU financial situation, showing us that there's problems in the UE leading to not holding together, as you see in this article.
The Economy News presents Europe on the verge of collapse, Soros. Billionaire financier George Soros has warned that the European Union is on the verge of collapse over the migrant crisis and is in danger of kicking the ball further up the hill in its management of the issue, which has seen more than 1 million migrants and refugees arrive in the region in 2015. In an interview with the New York Review of Books, Soros added that the German Chancellor Angela Merkel is key to solving the crisis. Merkel led Europe's response to the migrant crisis, opening Germany to the refugees that had traveled from the Middle East, in particular Syria, to try and find a new home in Europe. The decision by the German leader marked a sea change in her policy. In the interview, Soros said he welcomed Merkel's move. "There is plenty to be nervous about," the financier said. As she, Merkel, correctly predicted, the EU is on the verge of collapse. The Greek crisis taught the European authorities the art of muddling through one crisis after another. This practice is popularly known as kicking the can down the road, although it would be more accurate to describe it as kicking a ball uphill so that it keeps rolling back down. Merkel correctly foresaw the potential of the migration crisis to destroy the European Union. What was a prediction has become the reality. The European Union badly needs fixing. This is a fact, but it is not irreversible. And the people who can stop Merkel's dire prediction from coming true are actually the German people. Now it's time for Germans to decide, do they want to accept the responsibilities and the liabilities involved in being the dominant power in Europe? Soros' comments come as Finland's finance minister, Alex Stubb, told CNBC that Germany's open policy on migrants was humane. That was probably the right thing to do at the time, but the key issue here is that one of the fundamental freedoms of the European Union is under threat, and that is the free movement of people in the whole Schengen Agreement. On top of that, we've had a euro crisis which is about free movement of money, so two of the core pillars of European integration are under threat right now, said Stubb, to CNBC in Davos. In his interview Wednesday, Stubb denied the idea that the Schengen zone, which allows the free passage of EU citizens through almost all of its members, is a security threat to Europe. We shouldn't draw parallels between the refugee crisis and terrorism. The roots of terrorism are much, much deeper than that. What we need to watch out for is radicalization. What does this mean? It means we need to get these people to work, we need to give these people employment, we need to give them hope, we need to integrate them into our societies, they need to learn our languages, said the finance minister, to CNBC. Stubb, known for his fiscally hardline views, explained to CNBC why he wants to improve competitiveness in Finland. "We basically need to do what Germany did in the late 1990s, early 2000s. We need to take some hard reforms. Basically, I'm looking at a positive circle or a virtuous circle of the economy. That means number 1, we become more competitive. Number 2, we get more exports. Number 3, we get more jobs. Number 4, we get more taxes, which I like as finance minister. And then number 5, in order to finance our welfare state, we use those taxes. Stubb also shared his thoughts on the UK referendum vote. I think it would be a great travesty both for the UK, economically, politically and otherwise, and a travesty for the European Union if there was a divorce, he said to CNBC. Correction, the article has been corrected to show that the minister is not looking for a 15% cut in salaries. The Economy News presented. Please subscribe to our channel.
On May 20th, RT News with the headlines, EU in the process of collapsing on itself. This is an interview with the French National Front leader Le Pen, who spoke exclusively to the RT.
I believe that the European Union is in the process of collapsing in on itself for one simple reason. The two pillars on which it is founded, Schengen and the euro, are crumbling. So they're playing for time at the cost of billions of euros, trying to hold this structure up. But the European Union shines with the light of a dying star. So they're in sort of a mad downward spiral in which they're capable of anything today to try and keep this building standing. The threat of punishing countries which do not accept migrants, a €250,000 fine for each migrant not taken in, is in itself revealing. The threats, the blackmail now used systematically by the European Union, is above all a gigantic problem of weakness. What is the European Union going to do? Is it going to punish Great Britain because it voted on leaving? Is it going to impose economic sanctions on Britain and refuse free trade agreements? But I beg your pardon, in the European Parliament, we're voting on free trade deals with the entire world, including with countries that pose massive problems to our agriculture and industry, and we would refuse to sign business deals with a neighboring country. The more they do, the more they show their true colors. All things considered, perhaps it's useful to go through all of this.
So you're not scared of grave consequences for France in the event of a Frexit?
If France leaves the European Union no longer exists.
By 2017, the United Kingdom is expected to hold a referendum to decide whether or not to remain a member of the European Union. The UK has been a part of the EU since 1973 and decided to remain a member state after a referendum in 1975. So why does the UK want to leave the EU? Well, Prime Minister David Cameron has said that the EU imposes too many restrictions on British lawmakers. Critics say that the UK will be forced to abandon its pound currency and adopt the euro currency, which has historically been the weaker of the two. Adoption of the euro is expected of all EU countries by the year 2020, but many are worried that the euro is not only unstable, but able to be influenced by weaker countries like Greece. The UK is also concerned about European restrictions imposed on their immigration laws. The EU currently provides the ability for migrants to access employment and benefits. However, the British Prime Minister has been working to restrict benefits and housing to those who have been in the country for at least 4 years. This proposal has been directly opposed by the European Commission, leading many Britons to question why the EU has so much say in British welfare. Some conservative groups feel like Europe is manipulating the British government, and that policymakers have lost control over trade, human rights, and migration. EU law is supreme over UK law, meaning that lawmakers in the British House of Commons are technically beholden to those in the European Parliament in Brussels. Anti-EU activists believe that European regulations will undermine British interests. So how would a British exit affect both the EU and the UK? Well, analysts say it could join Norway, Iceland, and Liechtenstein in direct single market access. This would be enacted per the existing agreement on the European Economic Area. Many trade regulations would remain the same without imposing the same export and import tariffs as non-EU countries. However, it wouldn't help the UK's issues with free movement of labor, which is still guaranteed in the EEA agreement. It would also slow investment in the UK, which would no longer be seen as an entryway into EU trade. Similarly, the EU would lose some of its clout as one of its largest economic and political heavyweights goes off on its own. But all of this is based on who you ask. At the moment, the EU and UK are in talks to resolve their differences. But if they can't come to a solution, the scheduled referendum will likely take place. Overall, the United Kingdom hasn't made up its mind on the EU yet, and it will take the upcoming referendum to solve the question once and for all. Greece has also threatened to leave the Eurozone, raising the question of whether being an EU member is even worth it. Learn more about the EU's struggles in our video here.
In 1993, the European Union, as we now know it, emerged and offered all EU citizens a common visa, a common legislative and judicial body, and common voting rights. Later in the 90s, a common currency, the euro, was also established between many of the European Union members.
Thanks to your help, TestTube News is so close to hitting 1 million subscribers, so make sure to like and subscribe for new videos every day.
To start, the official members of the European Union are, in decreasing order of population, Germany, France, the United Kingdom, Italy, Spain, Poland, Romania, the Kingdom of the Netherlands, Greece, Belgium, Portugal, the Czech Republic, Hungary, Sweden, Austria, Bulgaria, Denmark, Slovakia, Finland, Ireland, Croatia, Lithuania, Latvia, Slovenia, Estonia, Cyprus, Luxembourg, and Malta.
The European Union. Here's how it works. We'll start with the European Commission. It's the powerful civil service of the EU, the engine room, if you like. It's run by 28 commissioners, one from each member country. It administers much of the money that the EU spends. But this is also where new laws are born. It's political. The Commission is based in Brussels, in this glass and steel building with lots of flags in front of it. Next, the European Parliament. It's based in Brussels, in this glass and steel building, but sometimes everyone goes to this glass and steel building in Strasbourg instead. Members, or MEPs, sit here. There are 751 from all over Europe. Parliament started as an underpowered talking shop, but has become a serious player, voting on nearly all the laws proposed by the European Commission. There's more. The Council of the European Union. It's where the governments of the 28 member countries have their say. Representatives of said governments meet in this building in Brussels. Sometimes all the leaders meet here to give political direction to the EU. Generally, there's a deal at the end. It's usually a compromise. One more thing. There's the European Court of Justice. It's there to make sure everyone sticks to the rules and follows the laws. It also sorts out squabbles between the Commission, the Council and the Parliament. It's in Luxembourg, and it looks like this. And in a nutshell, that's how the EU works.